we have to talk about PragerU. Because of course we do. Because no matter what we do, PragerU will always, and I mean always, always find some way to say something ridiculously dumb into the void. This time, though, it's about Columbus Day, because of course it is. Because Columbus Day / Indigenous People Days just happened recently, so PragerU decided to do their yearly tradition of providing us with a video that talks about why immigrants should love Columbus Day? Okay, sure thing.
As Columbus Day dies a slow, woke death, it might be a good idea to consider how this national holiday came about in the first place.
A slow, woke death. This is the face of somebody who was just reading the teleprompter and hasn't actually taken a moment to consider anything that she's saying. Which, you know, makes sense. That's what PragerU does.
The answer might surprise you. Ready for it? The purpose of Columbus Day was to encourage Americans to be more accepting of immigrants.
Was it now? Was it now? Because if memory serves, typically when you actually call a day Columbus Day, what you're celebrating is Columbus? Like, when we have Veterans Day, we're celebrating the veterans, right? When we have Memorial Day, we are celebrating the sacrifices or honoring the sacrifices of veterans. When we have Thanksgiving, we are giving thanks. So why is it that Columbus Day, magically, is the day that we don't do what the day says? Okay. Let's go ahead and see here. Columbus Day commemorates the explorer Christopher Columbus landing in the New World on October 12, 1492. Okay. That's from the U.S. Embassy. That's from embassy.gov. That doesn't say anything about celebrating Indigenous Americans. It does say that it also celebrates the cultural heritage of Italian Americans, but only because people believe that Columbus was born in Italy, which isn't really the same thing. But okay, sure. Why not?
Specifically, Italian immigrants.
Yep, there we go. There's the thing that I was going to talk about. So, this is like... You know how people say, oh, you should actually like this thing that this very bad person is doing because they're black or they're LGBTQ, and you leftists love that. You should love Christopher Columbus. After all, you leftists love immigrants, and Columbus Day was supposed to celebrate immigrants. Razor says, why are things so predictable? Yeah, I didn't actually even watch this video before going into this. I clicked this video blind. It was in my video suggestions feed, which you guys should go onto Discord and add video suggestions for me to cover. It's a really cool thing you can do that helps with the channel a ton. But this was in the video suggestions on Discord. So I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and click it. It's PragerU. Why not? Why not? It's PragerU. What's the worst that could happen? I like that all it took was a millisecond to know what angle they were going to be going with the video.
Explorer, once universally regarded as a great hero, was the symbol of the holiday, not the focus of it.
He was the symbol of the holiday, not the focus? No. He was definitely the focus. It was focusing on the idea of American ideals, entrepreneurship, and innovation through the lens of Christopher Columbus, apparently embodying all of those things.
Here's the historical context. Following a mass migration from southern Italy beginning in the 1880s, the status of Italian Americans was at an all-time low.
Okay.
How low was clearly illustrated by one of the single worst episodes of racial violence in American history.
And the reason we changed it from Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day for a lot of people, and I say we changed it. We didn't really change shit. Columbus Day is still the noted national holiday. But the reason that a lot of people want it to be Indigenous People Day is because Columbus is not viewed as a discoverer of America, but a colonizer of a land, or at least the beginning of the colonization process of a land that already had indigenous people in it. So why call it a Columbus Day instead of Immigrant Day? Yeah, if you want it to be a day that celebrates immigrants, then call it Immigrant Day.
The mass murder and lynching of 11 Italian Americans in New Orleans in 1891. Hatred against the Italian newcomers had been brewing for years, and was openly encouraged by leading newspapers of the day. For example, in 1882, the New York Times ran an editorial under the headline, "Our Future Citizens," in which the Times stated, "There has never been, since New York was founded, so low and ignorant a class among the immigrants as the Southern Italians." So, she's actually not wrong on this one. Columbus Day was created by President Harrison in 1892 in response to anti-Italian lynching of Italian Americans in New Orleans. That's actually true. Hell, during World War II, a lot of Italian Americans were considered enemy aliens. It's amazing how that happens. Who's an enemy and who's white changes depending on where we are. So this is actually one of those times where PragerU is correct. Now, granted, what they're having to do is they're having to ignore the fact that by calling it Columbus Day now, by celebrating Columbus and the things that he did, we are ignoring, you know, the raping and pillaging and all the other shit that he was known for. We have to ignore that context when we bring him up. It's like saying, I want to make a holiday that celebrates United States presidents. And you go, why? Well, you know, JFK was assassinated, so I want to call attention to the danger that American presidents are in when they take up their oaths of office. And you go, okay, cool. What are we going to call that day? Oh, I think we should call it Andrew Jackson Day. I think that would be a good idea. Like, if you wanted to be about Italian Americans, if you want to do that, if the idea of the holiday is to try to make it so that these people are more accepted, more celebrated, that's an understandable motivation. Historically, it's actually true. But in modern day, when we have access to history books and we know the things that Columbus did outside of the stepping foot in the Americas myth that we have floating around everywhere, with that added context, just as Columbus Day can be created because of anti-Italian sentiment, Indigenous Day can just as easily coexist with it or even take its place when people go, oh, wait a minute. The original purpose of the holiday isn't necessarily needed anymore, and Native Americans still have a lot of shit to deal with in the States. In 1887, the same New York Times wrote approvingly of the lynching in Mississippi of a man they referred to as Dago Joe, Dago being an ethnic slur for Italians. Anti-immigrant sentiment was especially intense in New Orleans, where Italians were settling in large numbers. Local papers accused them of working for below-market wages, engaging in all manner of crimes, and being more loyal to the Pope than the president.
So again, we have a scenario where the information that PragerU is providing is actually true. Now, it's basically engaging in whataboutism, because the reason that Columbus Day is being thought of more as Indigenous People Day as opposed to as Columbus Day is because people would like to celebrate the people who were colonized as opposed to the colonizer. Again, this is the problem when you take the historical figure and you put him as the figurehead of the holiday. Eventually, certain things that historical figure did will come up and people will have to figure out how they feel about that. And if you don't feel like you like the terrible things that Christopher Columbus did, then maybe you don't like Columbus Day as a concept. Seems pretty cut and dry to me. It is interesting here to note, though, that I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain that PragerU doesn't actually give a shit about Italian Americans.
These seething resentments broke to the surface when the city's police chief, David Hennessy, was assassinated in the fall of 1890. As the chief lay dying in the street, a witness claimed to have heard him say that Dagos had shot him. In a response, authorities rounded up hundreds of Italians, eventually charged.
Isn't it funny? Like, just as evidence that this is not a problem anymore, like in regards to how bad it used to be. So, Dago being a slur that was commonly used to refer to Italian people is something that PragerU's perfectly fine saying, but if you ask them to say, I don't know, another commonly used slur for another racial group of people that also face hardship in America, they probably wouldn't do that on camera. And, you know the slur I'm talking about. It's a tactical one. Said blame the employer for underpaying people and using immigrants to scapegoat. Said literally today that's what cops do to black people. So if you want to go, actually no, this holiday is very important for us to celebrate still because look at the plights of Italian Americans. Well, actually not really that much anymore, not by comparison. As evidenced by it being completely acceptable to use that slur right now. It's lost slur status because it's lost weight because that particular brand of racism in America has kind of gone by the wayside in favor of people who want to be anti-black or anti-Semitic or most recently anti-Chinese because when COVID hit, Trump decided to fan those particular flames.
Charging 9 of them with complicity in Hennessy's murder. When their trial resulted in 6 not guilty verdicts and 3 mistrials, the public was outraged. Further inflamed by the local press, some decided to take justice into their own hands. According to journalist Aaron Blakemore, here's what happened. Thousands of angry residents gathered near the jail. Impassioned speakers whipped the mob into a frenzy, painting Italian immigrants as criminals who needed to be driven out of the city. A group of vigilantes stormed the prison, grabbing not just the men who had been acquitted or given a mistrial, but several who had not been tried or even accused in the crime.
Soccer points out, again, at the same time in the same area, black people got lynched in untold numbers. Yeah, but I'm not going to bring that up here because that would feel very much like whataboutism. I'd rather point out the actual issues with Columbus as a person. So when you call the holiday Columbus Day, that's where you're getting. Also, can I just note that changing the name to Indigenous People Day still means you're still celebrating the same holiday. You're just changing the focus from the figurehead, who apparently doesn't matter, to people who actually do matter that much. It's strange to me. Like, PragerU can simultaneously say, actually, Columbus wasn't the important part of Columbus Day. It was the Italian immigrants, actually. Okay, cool. Then why not just change the day to Italian Immigration Day? Why specifically Columbus Day? Why are you worried about it specifically being Columbus Day? If you need it to specifically be Columbus Day, the historical precedent isn't what matters there. What matters is the motivation behind Columbus as an individual. Like, if we're going to put him up as the figurehead, as the guy we're looking at, then we need to actually look at the shit he did. And if the shit he did isn't that great, then maybe celebrating him is not that great. You can't hide behind the position that you're not really celebrating him, because his name's in the goddamn title.
Shots rang out. When the shooting stopped, 11 bodies were riddled with bullets and torn apart by the crowd. Outside the jail, the mob cheered as the mutilated bodies were displayed. Some corpses were hung, others were plundered for souvenirs. The next day, the New York Times celebrated the crime with a headline that read, "Chief Hennessy avenged. 11 of his Italian assassins lynched by a mob. These descendants of bandits and assassins are to us a pest without mitigations," the Times editors wrote.
Yeah, America was really fucking racist in the past. Still is, just in different ways.
In protest, the Italian government broke off diplomatic relations with the United States. Tensions receded only after the U.S. government paid an indemnity to the Italians. Despite the New York Times' incendiary rhetoric, much of the country was outraged by the massacre. In his 1891 State of the Union address, Republican President Benjamin Harrison pledged to protect foreign...
I like how they specifically say Republican president. Like, they enunciate, like they have to go, it was the Republican. The good ones. Ignoring the fact that, you know, in modern days, Republicans are very different than they were back then.
...nationals from mob violence. Then, in July 1892, Harrison issued a proclamation celebrating the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's discovery of the New World.
Which we already covered.
It was a timely pretext to a greater purpose, to raise the status of a badly shaken Italian-American community. Harrison's proclamation did more. Italian Americans now had a way to include themselves in the American story. And not surprisingly, New York City figured prominently in that narrative. In the late 19th century,
So again, we're not getting misinformation. The information they're giving is accurate. Again, I looked this up just to double-check myself because, you know, the knee-jerk reaction with PragerU is to go, aha, they're wrong about this. But no, a lot of times they're right. It's the reasons why they are engaging in their rhetoric that you have to look at. Why do you want it to be Columbus Day so much? Why does it need to be Columbus specifically? What did he do that you need to celebrate? And if you're celebrating one thing he did, are we looking at the entire scope of what he did?
one could say that Italian immigrants essentially built the city's
Her
infrastructure.
family's being held by
According to the Library of
Prager.
Congress, they went to work on the growing city's municipal works projects, digging canals, laying gas lines, building bridges, and tunneling out the New York subway system. In 1890, nearly 90% of the laborers in New York's Department of Public Works were Italian immigrants. But of course, Italian Americans have made countless and enormous contributions to every area of American life over the nation's 250-year history. At least one signer of the Declaration of Independence was Italian American. Many cabinet members and Supreme Court justices have been of Italian descent.
Okay, so they're just going to spend the entirety of the video going, aha, it's actually to celebrate the Italians, despite, you know... Okay, so, again, they're not actually lying when they say that. It's just the subtext under PragerU that you have to look at. Yes, the purpose of it was, according to what I can find, to make sure that Italian Americans were celebrated as a reaction to things like lynch mobbing. But now, the modern-day focus on it being Columbus is what every single PragerU and Steven Crowder and right-wing think piece has been about. I like how the strategy changes from actually Columbus was a hero who should be celebrated and revered for all the good shit he did, and then it changes later to, well, actually it's not really about Columbus, it was about Italian immigrants. It's interesting that they change the narrative as much as they do. But with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's PragerU. What else can you really say about it? Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, insert end of video tagline here. But you guys did make it to the end of a video, didn't you? So I guess that means we need to cover fan art. This one is from Sale. Play-Doh is not the most precise art medium, but I think it turned out okay. The beads were aligned better, but it didn't dry well, and I had to hot glue them back on. But Suris is definitely not a Pokemon in my definitely not Pokemon tabletop RPG. Jesus. The next one we have here is from Mathematical Cabbage. Not really based on anything in particular. It's male slime Suris. With me just going, chat is going nuts behind me, aren't they? And yeah, everybody's reaction to Salem's male model has been, certainly something. Certainly something. The next one we have, the last one we have here is... That is menacing. That is menacing. This one is from Ashroom. Says, hello, I'm a relatively new subscriber, but I did a sketch of the silly while procrastinating. Well, I like it. I think it looks fan-fucking-tastic. And just... This looks like I'm about to go nuts killing someone or something, and it's adorable. I enjoy it. I find very strange things adorable. As always, everybody, thank you all for your fan art submissions, and if you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, drop it in the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and roll those credits. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you. Sagittarius, I'm not saying that part. And Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.